We're back. The Council of Wokebeards, or whatever the fuck we're going to call ourselves. So we have, what, 2 episodes to go over this time? The battle that defined the Second Age between Galadriel, the Númenóreans, the villagers led by Bronwyn the Brave, and Adar and his 500 orcs. And then the second one with the Mordor, the Mordor reveal.
Yeah. Where would you like to begin?
I don't know. I mean, I guess we should start with the first. Let's start at the very beginning. The episode 6.
6? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, fast travel is a thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Apparently.
Well, they adopted that from the video games, right? Fast traveling is a part of the canon.
Yeah. And
I think. Well, people get really mad when I suggest that fast travel, because when we're talking about fast travel, I don't think we're actually suggesting that they literally teleported.
No.
We're talking about, like, from a filmmaking perspective, they haven't shown us how these different storylines are progressing at different speeds. So it feels like right when they're getting ready for this battle and, like, laying the trap and setting the trap for the orcs, it feels like the Númenóreans are still at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I calculated about around 2,000 miles from Númenor to Tir Harad or whatever. And so it feels like they're fast traveling, and that seems to be like a pretty big failure for a show like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I keep seeing people defend it by stating that the two storylines could be on different timelines. More time could be passing for the Númenóreans than was passing in Ostirith and was it Tir Harad? Is that what they're calling it?
I think so.
Yeah.
And but to your point, if that was the case, the show and the writers utterly failed in conveying that, and so you're left with this impression that it's just a leisurely sail up the coast for them to get there.
Yeah, uneventful apparently. Like the entire voyage just was boring and pointless and not worth depicting at all.
Yeah.
Well, except for Elendil revealing that his wife drowned.
The sea is always right.
The sea's always right. It cracked me up when he said that. I was like, "Wow, okay."
Maybe she drowned.
Bitch had it coming. Yeah, like this is just a basic filmmaking editing thing. Like you have to convey the passage of time in a way that because what they did is they anchored the show with that comet early on, showing us that things were happening concurrently, right?
Exactly.
Arondir and Bronwyn saw the comet. Gil-galad saw the comet. We saw Galadriel jumping off the ship to go swim across the ocean at the same moment. So they were anchoring that. That's clearly an anchoring moment, right? And then you think everything's kind of happening at the same time, but they're not conveying how much time is passing. And it really, like, I thought maybe in the 5th episode they could have shown the Númenóreans traveling to the Southlands.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the 6th episode, they could actually be there, and it would just because the 5th episode they didn't do anything.
Yeah, they were like planning to go again, like they did at the end of the 4th episode.
Yeah,
total waste of time.
Well, and if they're trying to go for the whole Tolkien catastrophe, something happens just in the nick of time because it's through some sort of divine intervention. Again, they totally failed in conveying the significance and the drama of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they'd have done a better job showing how long that journey was and how miraculous it would have been for them to show up just at the right moment to save the village, if that was their intent, it did not come across at all. It just seemed like they sailed a little ways, rode over a hill, and they were there.
They charged the whole way.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. Yeah, like they would have had to have ridden for days. And so why are they charging and galloping to this place where presumably they have no idea where it is unless Halbrand's
Yes.
leading them there?
Well, they have one village in the Southlands, and that's it, and that's where they went.
That's literally what he's the king of. He's the
Yeah.
king of the village or two that are in the Southlands. Yeah. That's another thing. Like not only is time kind of screwed up here, but place, right? What is this culture, the Southlands? What is its political makeup? Like, where does the king come from? Do they have a castle? Like, some of these details actually do kind of matter, because it's like when Bronwyn sees his little sigil and Muriel's like, here's your king. And she's like, are you really my king? And he's like, yeah, I guess I am. And everyone's like, hail to the king. And it's like, really, guys? Like, that's it? Like, that's how it worked? I didn't realize it was so easy.
Yeah. No, they have no, there's no culture. There's no description, no depiction. It's pretty absurd that it's just like a blanket of, it's like a token placeholder. This village is like, who are these people?
And wouldn't he come from a family, and he would have to say, yes, I'm Halbrand, son of someone who was the prior king, or that the older folks in the village probably would have known of, or something along those lines. They're like, there's no grounding in the setting. Like it's just like he just walks in, and he's like, oh, I'm the king because they said I am.
Yeah. Well, and what's up with this sense of place again? They showed classic Tolkien mappage just for the Harfoots, for like in episode 3 or whatever, and like ever since then, there's been no real depiction of like that kind of omniscient map view of the world, which I don't know, they just don't want to use that anymore, or like why did they even use it in the first place?
And they had a perfect opportunity to transition into that with Miriel and Elendil. When they're looking at the map, they could have zoomed into the map and shown the route that the Númenóreans are taking up Anduin and across the mountains. And they totally dropped the ball. And then a big thing they dropped the ball on, I think I hinted at this in text messages, was just the significance of Elendil and Isildur coming to where Gondor is going to be for the first time and seeing those lands. And they just skip right over that. Without there should have been a scene where like Isildur, something to convey the significance that this will be his kingdom someday, and this is his first time ever seeing it. And as I assume that valley that they were galloping through was where the Morgul Vale will be someday, where initially that was where Minas Ithil was, which was Isildur's city, which eventually becomes Minas Morgul when the Witch King takes it over. And so that's like where he, that was his seat, and then his brother Anarion was in Minas Anor, which becomes Minas Tirith, which is in Return of the King. And they just gloss over that, like it's,
they omitted it essentially. No, it's like yet again, their revisionist fiction history is they're at it again, just destroying. They bought the rights to destroy the fucking world building.
Absolutely. Isn't that the weird thing? Like I understand like you have to change things to make an adaptation. You just have to. And of course, filling in the blanks of the Second Age, filling in the blanks of the appendices, you're going to have to take some liberties. But they have taken so many liberties, and they've done it in a way. I think the biggest problem is they've done it in a way that's not as good. And it wouldn't even be good if this was a wholly original story.
No,
like this, even if this wasn't Tolkien, this wouldn't be a very good fantasy. Or
we've said it over and over again. If it was a good show, we could set aside all the changes to the lore they're making, because we can appreciate a quality show on its own merits. But not only did they butcher the lore, but they're making a horrible show on top of it.
Yeah. Kind of like the Wheel of Time. Remember that? How bad that was?
It was so bad.
Yeah, we never even finished that. Yeah.
Same. I quit after the second episode. I was just like, this is fucking tragic.
It was, and I don't even like the Wheel of Time books, and I thought the show was dog shit. I was like, why'd they change that? I mean, I like, if you're going to change the Wheel of Time, there's a lot of ways you could change it to make it better, I think. But God, it was bad. I watched the whole season, and it was just
But the battle, yeah. So what about the Galadriel arrow dodging?
Oh my God,
it was a really cool move on horseback, but when she comes back up with that crazy sword strike and that orc just blows up like a fucking water balloon.
Elven swords blow up orcs. That's it. That's Tolkien said that.
All criticals.
It was
all
like
crits.
It was like the first sentence of Lord of the Rings. He's like, by the way, before we start, elven swords blow up orcs, literally. Well, her move is cool if she wasn't wearing like a heavy ass plate armor. Like, why is she in that armor?
Yeah, shouldn't she be in a robe?
Like, or just like, I don't know, like what, like if, like, maybe like a chain mail thing or like just elven clothes. I don't know. It's so bad. It's just so bad. I think you'd tip the horse over, honestly, if you jerked off to the side like that and just, I don't know. Like, the battle itself felt, well, okay, let's see. In this episode we had only, in this 6th episode, we had only the Bronwyn, Arendir, Galadriel, Numenor stuff, where there was no Harfoots, there was no Elrond, no Durin. So we had, before the Numenorians show up, the villagers set a trap at the tower, and then they go back to the village. And this is another like moment where it's just, I'm having a hard time understanding how people watch this show and think this is really great, because they're in a fortified tower and they leave to go back to the village, which they had already left to go to the tower in the first place.
Yeah. And then
they knock it down with an arrow to a rope. Apparently the tower was held up by a rope.
Yes.
Rope. Yeah.
Right. That's how structural engineering worked in the, you know.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy, guys. It's a fantasy.
The fact that weren't the orcs coming from the village to go to the tower? And so if they return to the tower, to the village from the tower, they're going to run into the orcs. And wouldn't the orcs have left some orcs at the village?
Yeah.
Or would they all have just, because apparently he has like, I don't know, a limitless number of orcs. There's more keep showing up. So
no,
none of it makes sense.
He's like, guys, these villagers are dumb. They'll probably barricade all their women and children into the tavern for us, so we don't need to leave anyone.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so bad.
Well, and then the action scenes, like I'm so sick of, oh, they're gonna die. Oh, they're saved at the last minute.
No, everyone had how many were? Every single character was about to get murked, and then there's the save a hoe scene, and there's like that happened like 6 times in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and then they mess one up where like Isildur's riding down to save his dad, like pulling off these awesome moves, jumping over orcs with his horse, only to have Halbrand save him at the last minute instead.
Yeah.
Wait,
well, she only sends Isildur. She's got like the like 40 knights or whatever, and she's like, go, and it's like one at a time, guys. One at a time.
Why is she even there? I don't even understand why she needed to be there.
So she could get blinded.
Yes,
and then she could tell Elendil, she's like, don't tell anyone I'm blind, but let's put a scarf over my eyes in the next scene.
Yes.
Oh man. And then the fake out with Bronwyn, like who
saw my god
coming? And I'm so sick of, in the Middle Ages, all the first aid consists of cauterizing wounds. Like that, like magically it makes you better. Like that stops internal bleeding.
Well, there were some seeds or something, weren't there, that they put in there first?
I guess that turned into gunpowder or something. And like
gunpowder seeds, everyone has them.
And then it's another like fake out scene where like, oh no, is she dead? Oh no, it's gonna wait a minute, and then she takes a big breath, and it's like, who didn't see that coming a mile away? It's just so cliched.
And the next morning she's fine, like no problems at all.
Walking around like nothing happened.
And then after the volcano hits, the next day, she's like all done up and her hair's nice.
Yeah, once again, flawless.
Yeah,
just face.
Wearing her Lululemon tank top.
Oh yeah, that brand was on. I'm pretty sure you could see the
tag,
the logo,
the logo. Yeah.
Well, and then that's just the stuff with Adar, the constant flip flopping of behavior, like and once again, Galadriel goes on in the episode 7 when she's talking to little boy, whatever his name is,
Theo.
Yeah, right. Thank you. And she's like, "Oh, killing all these orcs. We shouldn't celebrate that. It's actually kind of a bad thing." And you're like, "Bitch, you were trying to genocide everybody last episode. What is this?"
It's like 14 minutes ago. You wanted to genocide all the orcs. That whole scene where she's talking to Adar. Oh my god. First of all, I want to give some props though to what's his name, Joseph Mall, the guy that plays Adar.
Yeah.
He's great.
He deserves a better show.
Yeah,
he's so good.
He's the
And
best
I like
of the show.
Absolutely, 100%. And he's wasted there though. I mean, it's just like, holy crap. Well, first of all, okay, go ahead.
Oh god, so that it's cool. You know, we touched on this. It'd be cool if he was one of the original elves, and it ends up he is like one of the originally corrupted elves, one of the first Uruks. But then bringing up this moral dilemma of, you know, orcs were enkindled with the secret fire, and they're children of Iluvatar also, and you know they have souls and whatnot. That was an issue Tolkien was grappling with outside of the text, like trying to figure out how to resolve that. But it wasn't ever an issue in universe. It wasn't like anybody ever stopped and said, "Oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't be slaughtering all these, you know, monsters trying to kill us and literally in some cases eat us, because they also have souls and they're also children of Iluvatar." So it was just, it's a weird.
I don't mind it. I don't mind that so much though. I don't mind that Adar has that belief, right? Like, it makes sense for him to kind of.
If he'd been corrupted by Morgoth, he wouldn't. And maybe I'm injecting my own like opinion into this, but I don't think someone corrupted that long ago and one of the original Uruks would have any sort of like paternal instinct towards the other orcs, and a drive to like create a homeland. And maybe this is all, you know, that's just the bullshit that he feeds them to motivate them. It could be, you know, he's got more sinister or ulterior motives. But it just, I don't know, that conversation from a like an in Middle Earth philosophical and ethical position just rubbed me the wrong way. It didn't seem appropriate.
My only pushback to that is that it's one of the only moments in the whole show that has any sort of interesting philosophical questions attached to it. You know, because this show is very, very
vapid.
Very vapid. It's very, so that to me is actually like, I'm kind of interested by that, at least, you know, even if it's not exactly true to, you know, whatever, at least it's kind of interesting to have this figure who in a way is presenting a moral argument that we can relate to more than Galadriel, who is like, I'm going to kill every last motherfucking one of you and make you watch, and then I'm going to kill you. You know, and at least there's some sort of sense. I don't know. You know more about all that than I do, but to me at least, this is one singular, like one of the very few moments in this show where I've been like, well, that's interesting. Like that's kind of a different take on orcs and on bad. Like, he's an interesting bad guy to me. Like he has more of a moral complexity than a lot of the heroes.
No, as like a meta commentary on the concept of evil within fantasy and within Tolkien also, and how it's such a dichotomy and so unquestioned that, you know, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, the good guys kill the bad guys. Yeah, as a meta commentary on that, yeah, it's interesting to bring that up. And it leads into a whole debate around, you know, the problem of evil in general when you posit the existence of an all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing deity like Iluvatar. You know, why did he allow Morgoth to do what Morgoth did in the first place? Like, he set up this whole world, this whole universe, all the rules that govern it. He infused all the beings as children of his thought with their very natures and with their propensities and what they would want to do and what they're going to do. And he already knows everything that's going to happen. So everything that's happening is ultimately his responsibility. So how do you reconcile that with his nature as a omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent being? And you know, that's a real world issue with Christianity and other.
Why is the serpent in the garden?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Alfred Whitehead, the classic philosopher, posited the process theology, where the fates have to play out, even if they're, even if God is omniscient and omnipotent and lets all these things happen, that the time has to actually pass. And I think that kind of plays into Tolkien's mythopoetic.
Yeah, his
building is
his answer to the problem of evil is that with no matter how it may appear evil in the moment, but it ultimately always leads to goodness and better things. And that's what Iluvatar tells Morgoth, is like, whatever you do ultimately has its source in me, exalts my works and creates more good. But again, that begs the question, is like, why did it have to be that way? Why did you have to force all of these mortal souls to go through all this pain and suffering just to get to this endpoint of greatness? Why can't we just skip over all the pain and suffering and get to this endpoint of greatness? Why do you have to put everybody through this?
Because it makes a good story. And we're talking about, the religion of storytelling, which Amazon is completely fucking undermining.
No. Right. So outside of the world of the story, it's an awesome conversation and debate to have. But within Middle Earth, it's not something that ever comes up. It's not an issue that anybody ever debates that I'm aware of, where people have moral misgivings around killing orcs or fighting Morgoth, because it's not like any of the elves ever stop and say, hey, wait a second, Morgoth was created by Iluvatar and is only doing what Iluvatar kind of programmed him to do. Why are we all fighting each other? Like that never comes up within the setting.
Would it bother you less if this show was just smarter overall? Like, if overall this show was like an intelligent, thought-provoking show, and this conversation came up, would it? Because I feel like maybe it's partly also the fact that it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb compared to all the other conversations that happen. Like, because most conversations that take place in this show are really fucking stupid. Mm-hmm. Like, most conversations are either just chock full of exposition, or they're like
tired cliches,
or they're ripping off like, okay, like, the Bronwyn, when she's telling Theo what, he's like, tell me what you used to tell me at night.
Oh, God, how many times do they have to do that shit though?
And it's like this really, like, it's just so ridiculous, and it's purple prose. It's over the top, and it's like, we're trying really hard to be Tolkien, to the point that they're lifting like passages of Tolkien and then reinserting it somewhere else, Well,
not just from Tolkien, but they're also like lifting dialogue and scenes from the Jackson trilogy too.
Oh yeah, they're always doing that.
Like, yeah,
no, they riff on the Jackson shit all the time. Not to mention they hate on it in the Hollywood Reporter article, but we'll get to that later.
Oh yeah, that article, jeez. Fascists.
Okay, before adjacents. The best part of episode 6, when the Morgul blade type thing turns into a key that then slots in. And who the fuck was the guy that found it? He was just like possessed.
That was tavern keeper from the village.
Waldreg.
That's right. It was the tavern keeper, and so, but he, I guess, was compelled by the corrupted, intelligence of the blade to go wander to this slotted, locking mechanism to what it was that.
So there's a switcheroo that happens. Yeah. Adar sends him to do that.
Oh, that's right.
Adar sends him to do that. We don't hear that, but he's like, I've got a task for you. And then Adar wraps up that little hatchet in the cloth.
Yeah, he does the switcheroo. That's right. The hat.
Yeah. And then,
how did that happen?
And then they chase him down, but no one ever looks in the cloth. And then Arondir gets it back from Galadriel or something, and he goes to Theo, and Theo's like, I am a junkie. All I want is that hilt. And Arondir's like, here you go, junkie. Yeah. Take it. And then it's listed, and then they cut to Waldreg like turning the key and setting off the Rube Goldberg machine that it makes the dam break, and the dam breaks, and then that. Why would you write that? Why wouldn't they just make the volcano blow up?
Well, first of all, how
make this?
Yeah, it's like someone in purposefully built this mechanism to create like a steam explosion inside the fucking pits of Mount Doom, like that was planned, and that was the thing that was going to. It was
right. It was planned
it was planned ahead of time by who? And did Sauron build this dam complex? And he's like, one day, whenever the time comes, we're going to wait for this random moment that we're going to blow Mount Doom
that
up.
requires you to dig a lot of ditches and tunnels. Also, like if they had used the key before Adar had his orcs dig those ditches, it just would have broken the dam open, and the water just would have poured out into nowhere.
Yeah,
like,
not to mention the fact that Morgoth created Mount Doom, and it was there to begin with, and that's why Sauron picked that area as his stronghold,
because it was already spitting hot fire.
Yeah,
it didn't just decide to show up one day because of some steam bath explosion and shit fireballs on the villagers, which is also like, of course it's going to rain hell on everything, but they just had to.
Well, and that's the type of villain's master plan from someone's high school Dungeons and Dragons like campaign where you don't think through like who would actually set something up like this. Like,
it's like one of those mousetrap games.
Yeah,
like right where the ball hits the thing and it rolls down and hits the lever and the lever does and it's.
So at this point, I'm expecting Sauron to show up, and he's Dr. Evil. Like,
I was just about to say Dr. Evil. This is some Dr. Evil shit.
It's totally true. Oh God. It's Mike Myers. Yeah. It's been him the whole time.
That could go towards redeeming the show, honestly.
Oh my God. If Sauron was Mike Myers and Dr. Evil, I would, and it was all just this elaborate joke.
It should be a full parody at this point. They should just kick it in. They just started doing the second season. They should just straight up. I mean, they've already abandoned. They can't go back. It's just, it's just turning into a parody for sure.
Well, yeah, and it's like none of the scenes hit. The scenes don't hit like they want them to hit. Not only because they're written poorly, but because the overall everything like leading up to those scenes is such a travesty that you just don't care. Watching, the horses gallop across that valley to get to say, and I was just like, I don't care. Like, first of all, none of this ever actually happened in the Second Age, and second of all, like
there's a reason it didn't happen.
Yeah,
because
second of all,
terrible.
It doesn't make sense in the story they're trying to tell. So I'm like, how can I get invested? Like,
So yeah, the scene with Galadriel. So they capture Adar. Somehow Halbrand gets around to the other side of him and like trips his horse.
Right.
They capture him. They don't look in the package. They take him back. Galadriel threatens to kill all the orcs, and then him, and then he's like, "Hey, maybe you should look in the mirror and see, the evil you're looking for." And she's like, "Motherfucker, I will kill you right now."
Well, again, the whole like last minute like switcheroo stuff where like Halbrand's gonna kill him and Galadriel's like, "Halbrand, stop!" And then literally 5 minutes later, Galadriel's and Halbrand's like, "Galadriel, stop!" It's like, what?
No, and Halbrand once again happens to walk in at the right exact moment.
Exactly.
So everybody else gets saved. So does Adar twice.
Right, and Arondir gets saved by Bronwyn when in that orc fight. Yep. There's so many of those.
When Galadriel and Halbrand are having that awkward like bonding moment, and you're like, "Oh God, are they gonna kiss or something?" And the Númenórean soldier walks up right at the last moment to like leave the tension and like, like it's like, stop fucking doing that.
Well, that's because Celeborn doesn't exist.
Celeborn
is dead.
He dead.
No, your little video you did on their awkward possible future season 2 3-way love triangle is probably what's going to happen.
That's probably what. Well, it's got to be. Why else would they write out Celeborn and make it look like Galadriel thinks he's dead?
Yeah, and they want to have another switcheroo where like, oh, I thought he was dead, but he's back, and now, oh God, I have a new boyfriend. What are we? Which again, like, can we talk about this now? I know we're jumping episodes, but like, that is fundamentally counter to the nature of elves. When elves marry, they marry for life. Period. Yeah. Even if your spouse dies, like, you are still married to them, and so there's like no chance of them being attracted to or bonding with like another person, another mate. So even if
Galadriel needs her hoe phase,
like
she could use it. I got to just say, Galadriel needs to get laid.
Finwë had to get special dispensation from the gods to remarry after his wife died, giving birth to Feanor, and she was like the first elf to die in Valinor. It was like, oh, why did that happen? What's going on? Which is again begs the question, like, how do this is a criticism on Tolkien. It's like how did you set up this? How did the Iluvatar set up this whole system and think all this through without thinking like about telling people about what's going to happen? Like, yeah, you might die. Like, you have to figure out what you're going to do when like your spouse dies. You might want to have like rules and customs around that. But anyways,
and a living will. So, you should have a living will.
So the gods had to, like, Manwë had to commune with Iluvatar and be like, hey, one of these elves' wives died and he wants to get married again and have more kids. Like, can you do that? Is that okay? How does this all work? And so it's that big of a deal for an elf to remarry. And so if they pull that BS, that is I don't want to say it's the biggest lore fuck up that they will have made, but it's going to rank up.
Because there is mithril. There's mithril that we have to get to. It's pretty bad, though. I don't know that they're actually going to do a full on like love triangle, but I think they're going to just push it just enough. You know what I mean?
No, I think they're going to have, I can see some like Halbrand, Celeborn, spicy scenes where Halbrand's jealous and up in his face and being unreasonably, critical of what Celeborn's doing, or some bullshit like that.
When you said spicy scenes, I was kind of envisioning something more spicy between Celeborn and Halbrand. Yeah, and Galadriel's like, wait, what the fuck? Like, you guys.
Hey, if they're trying to keep this show, if the writers are on the fault line of the culture war, then they better let that shit happen, because nothing would be hotter than a little Celeborn Halbrand love fest.
Not to jump out of order on the episodes again, but I gotta bring this up because it's been bugging me. So at the end of episode 7, Halbrand has like a festering infected wound.
He gets on his horse.
Yeah, so they're going to find. Are they riding back to Linden to get him healed? Was that like? Because that's months of travel. Like, he's gonna be dead by the time you get there.
It's on the other fucking side of the continent.
Yeah.
But with fast travel, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I think Elvish healing is a euphemism for a Marvin, sex. This I did say this in my other video, so I'm kind of retreading that. But Elvish healing. I'm gonna Elvish heal you, baby.
Oh yeah. No, I saw that too. Oh, my other. That's a we'll keep bouncing around, but when he's convalescing in his little room. I counted 9 hanging candles, 9 chain hanging candles, and then another 6 candles on like the world market like furniture, and there was like little bowls and like knickknacks and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I thought they just came for like a quick skirmish, but apparently they came with all the amenities to have like a year-long war. And apparently Halbrand's tent, he needed all of his cultural knickknacks, like chests. There's like 3 side tables. There's a dresser. Like, I mean, what in the fuck was that setup? Like, I don't understand any of the context of any of that. Like, there's a nice little mat of like juniper branches or something. Like,
and they fit it all on 3 ships.
Yeah, and they fit it all on 3 ships with horses. And then he's like, oh, I'm gonna fucking die. And then they're like, let's get on a horse and ride to Linden.
Or maybe Eregion? Or like,
I think it might be Eregion. Either way.
That's still far away.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing also when Muriel's like, we sail at the tide, and she's got people wounded with like their legs lopped off and shit. Like, they're not going to make that voyage.
Like bitch, which tide are you talking about? You're in Mordor right now. This coast is a ways away.
Yes. No, it's right there. It's right there. And they have a whole camp. They're elaborate. Like, this is another like attention to detail thing. Like in the previous episode, they never show them having a camp.
Right.
But in this episode, they have a camp.
And
it's like a day's walk away, apparently.
It's like a Roman legionnaire camp. And I was like, where the hell did this come from?
And it's bigger than the village. And once again, where they put all this on 3 fucking ships.
Yeah. Did you see that drawing? I tweeted it, but it's got a picture of the ship. And then, like, underneath the water, it goes, like, way down, like, with multiple floors, like, with all the horses.
They're not even big ships. They're, like, schooners. Like,
you fit, like, 50 people in, like...
The Numenorians had, like, ginormous ships. Why aren't they, like, portraying that? Like...
because you know what?
Seen Middle-earth until this time setting that they decided to create.
But they said Pelargir was there. They said there's no Numenorian...
Exactly.
Haven.
That's right.
That's where Arendir and Bronwyn are going. So it's like,
they could have.
Why didn't they just sail to Pelargir and get
the horses and stuff. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's what I thought too. I was like, well, they could have just put that in ahead, like explain that first so that we weren't all like, what?
Is Umbar there? Are all the other Numenorian like
No, it's definitely like they have multiple teams of writers that intentionally don't talk to each other. They're like they're in isolation and they come up with, it's like they're given parts of each scene and they're supposed to just like, it's like Mad Libs. They're just like kind of filling in blanks and then they put it all together and it's so disjointed that there's just no cohesion and blatant contradictions over and over and over.
They're mad libbing with a Tolkien like encyclopedia and they're like, picking names to like
drop. I would like that. We should make a Rings of Power Mad Libs like Tolkien, like how to fuck up Tolkien book, Yeah, so we've kind of jumped episodes, which is fine because there wasn't a lot more in that other episode. That was all like the big battle episode. Well, but at the end of that,
apparently people survive pyroclastic flows unscathed.
Well, not everybody, not the one friend that you just.
Yeah,
that guy was gonna. You knew he was gonna die.
The moron. Yeah,
the moron, the nice guy. I mean, he's the nice friend. But everybody else survives pretty much unscathed.
Do any of us know that guy's name?
I don't know either of the friends' names.
Yeah.
The mean guy and nice guy.
Yeah, that just demonstrates how crappy the writing is. Like, none of us are invested in that guy. We're all like, oh, yeah, of course that guy died. He was the throwaway, like,
but do you think Isildur is dead?
I
don't know. Like,
no, he's just wasn't she? Wait, who was it? Theo was trapped under the. Yeah. Who was trapped under the?
Yeah. When Muriel got blinded, he was in the building when it collapsed.
Right. Oh, that's how she got blinded. Correct. It just kind of like sintered some ash into her eyes. Just
she didn't close her eyes in time.
She didn't close her eyes in time, but somehow survived the pyroclastic blast. Which, when you talk to a volcanologist, it's like one of the most powerful, dangerous things ever. And yeah, everybody, as someone said, I think some other YouTuber. Everyone was just covered in flaming hot Cheeto dust afterwards. Is what it looked like. Did look kind of tasty. Like everyone looked like they were caked in delicious, hydrogenated soybean oil and like paprika and like. I mean, I liked the tone. The sepia tone was nice, but like the horse on fire was cool. Galadriel doesn't pay attention to anyone.
Yeah, she's just like, die, bitches.
Yeah.
That's my question too, is how did she and Theo get separated from everybody else and end up in the woods like hiding from orcs? If they all woke up and like got up in the same they were all like together in the same village when the thing hit, but for some reason she and Theo like wandered off by themselves and ended up totally separated from everybody.
So that they could have that conversation, basically. Like when you ask why with these writers, it's so that they can do the thing that they want to do rather than follow the natural organic way a story should unfold. And
just like in episode 7 when I really don't care enough to remember the names, but our little Harfoot that goes and tries to tell the like cultists that Meteor Man went that way, and then they are like, oh, what the fuck, there's a bunch of Harfoots over here, and then they just decide to burn down half the fucking Harfoot wagons. It's because the writers were like, oh, we need this to happen, so little Harfoot goes and annoys the fucking cultists so that they can just burn their shit down, so that then her dad can give us a rousing Harfoot speech yet again.
The thing we do better than anybody else is we stick together, and we never ever leave anybody behind ever. And
we abandon our wounded,
and I wasn't stressed out because I sprained my ankle at all. You guys weren't going to leave me behind. This is a fine Irish accent.
Speaking of it, I just thought of another internal contradiction. So going back to when Halbrand is wounded, and Galadriel said we need to find elvish medicine to heal him. Remember the conversation Arondir had with Bronwyn about how elves don't have healers; they have artisans.
Oh,
elves don't get hurt, and they have artisans to heal your soul. So I was waiting. Arondir was standing right there, and I was waiting for him to like pop up and say, "Oh, great, yeah, let's go build him a statue. He'll feel much better."
Yes.
Oh God, I didn't even notice that one. There are so many of them, aren't there? So many little things like that.
Yeah, that whole initial conversation with Arondir is just like. Elrond is known as one of the greatest healers in Middle Earth. So like that whole concept, that whole initial conversation that they had Arondir have with Bronwyn, like it kind of went by me because I didn't realize he was an actual like elf from Beleriand and was there like when he had that conversation. That I thought he was like an Avari, like a dark elf, a wood elf, who never was associated with like the Noldor or the Sindar. So I was like, oh, maybe that's how they do it. And that culture is kind of cool. They're positing some new like elven culture stuff. But no, he's definitely like part of that other culture that Elrond's part of. And Elrond is the greatest healer in Middle Earth. But I guess that means that he is
a great lover,
or like
he gets all the hoes, except for Galadriel and Celeborn's daughter, who can't exist in this world, even though she. So Celebrian, what's her name? Is the wife of
Celebrian,
of Elrond and the mother of Arwen, a little known minor character in the whole scheme of things.
If they really want to get Tolkien fan kudos and points, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They really need to use Celeborn's Teleri name, which is Teleporno. That is
Teleporno.
The best ever.
Yeah, so we're getting spicy again.
Yeah.
Elvish healing, Halbrand and Celeborn, Teleporno. Damn. That is pretty amazing. I did not know that. All right, so Harfoots though, we were mentioning the weird cultists and that whole so I really wanted to like the Harfoots. They felt Tolkien-esque, if you want to use that word. There was something charming about them, but they've taken them in so many weird directions. And like, what's up with? They want him to heal the trees that have been burned by the volcano, and he's doing his magic stuff. And a little stupid ass Harfoot kid walks up underneath the tree, and a branch breaks, and then they're like, "Bye, dude.
Get the hell out!" Yeah.
Yeah. Yet another great writing choice to kick him out of the community because of like
he was doing what they asked him to do,
right? Yeah. And he gets all sad boy, and they're like, "You got to go because you almost." And no one actually got hurt.
Nope.
It was surprisingly that branch didn't just crush the fucking Harfoots.
Yeah. That would have been funny though.
That would have been funny, but still, no one got hurt. But still, it's an immediate reaction to just get rid of the guy. It's like, okay.
Well, and he saved them the episode earlier from wolves.
From the wolves, yeah. But
and there was no follow up for the frozen arm thing that scared Nori the previous episode. There was no
That's a repeated thing that they're showing with him is that somehow he can't control his powers, and so when he's trying to do something good, something bad always happens. So they actually hinted at that when Nori's dad, I can't remember his name, Bungo or whatever. Largo. When he twisted his ankle, they kept cutting back and forth between them putting up that canopy and the stranger chanting and drawing his runes and stuff. So somehow him channeling his powers contributed to Largo.
No, those were on two totally different timelines. That was happening totally separately from each other. I'm just kidding.
Okay. I'm very confused. But and then he does it with the fireflies when he makes the stars of the fireflies, but then it kills all the fireflies. And then when he's healing his arm, he freezes Nori. So they've repeatedly shown this, but I've yet to.
It's a part of the comedy of errors, or the tragedy of errors, or whatever the fuck the show is. Calamity is required for their story because there's nothing else there.
I mean, maybe it's tying back to that original theme that Galadriel's brother told her at the beginning, that in order to see the light, sometimes you have to touch the darkness, which I don't understand. How?
I think he said fondle the darkness.
Okay. Yeah. That was I don't remember Tolkien saying that, but okay.
That's why Galadriel is constantly flip-flopping, because she has to flirt with the dark side. Because that's what she's so conflicted and has no even though she has such a solid conscience, sometimes she then deviates from that by having she's so wishy-washy and has no she's so inconsistent, but whenever she's one way or the other, she is adamantly that way.
Yeah. And maybe they're taking from the story of Feanor and the Silmarils, the fact that he was such a rat bastard and had a dark side is what allowed him to create this amazing beauty and capture the light of the trees. But that's not true at all. he was able to do that in spite of the fact that he was a rat bastard and had a dark side, and that's what actually like led to his downfall and a whole bunch of tragedy. It wasn't like a necessary condition for him to have the powers and create the works of art that he did. It actually detracted from what he could have accomplished if he hadn't have been such an asshole.
Right. Which is deep character building.
Yeah.
Which we just don't get. It's so hard to connect anything from Tolkien's work to what these guys are doing.
Yeah.
Because you can say, "Oh, I wonder if they're like doing," it's like, no, I don't think that they are actually tapping into the themes or the motives or understanding that Tolkien had with his work. They're using cheap, cliched Hollywood tropes to tell a story set in this generic version of Middle Earth.
Sure. Yeah, and the tropes are even they're even more poignantly culturally appropriate because they're definitely derived from what's successful in streaming content. Like this is even beyond filmmaking. This is just playing, they're trying to hit their numbers and their metrics and shit. And like they're playing that game, which is fucking stupid because then you end up with every single dialogue in episode 7 being just trash. Like everyone hates the elves. The fucking Numenorians hate the elves. The dwarves hate the elves, except for Durin the Fourth. And then, when Durin's pops, the third fucking pulls his crest off because he's like, how dare you suggest Elrond could be a womb brother? Yeah. And then, and it's just Elrond's so sad again because the elves are just going to fucking die without Mithril. Like, what in the fuck?
And then Durin's whole thing, like, I could be great, Dad, if you weren't holding me back.
Yeah.
It's like,
cheap
high school drama. Like, what is going on?
Okay, I decided this is why they created two. As you said earlier in another episode of the Wokebeard podcast, there's only ever one Durin at a time. It's a reincarnation essentially of one Durin. Do you know why they created two Durins for this show? So that they could argue with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That is why. That is the only reason. Is so that they could argue. They love to make characters argue and create conflict.
And there's no other purpose to it. It doesn't really drive the story other than I guess they go and try to start mining it themselves until they get caught and
one wall. They have to walk through one wall to get to that. This is one wall. One dwarf gets through in 5 minutes.
Delving too greedily and too deep was knocking down one wall.
One wall.
Making Durin's Bane. Not to, and then Durin's Bane wasn't awoken until well into the Third Age. But hey, whatever.
Yeah. 1890 Third Age by Durin the Sixth.
Yeah.
Way later, and then the fact that the leaf, first of all, the cancer leaf, the death poison leaf, with the mithril next to it. Oh, mithril once again is being. That's why I was calling it. I'm miffed, so I'm calling it mithril from now on. I'm miffed because it's like mithril has this whole new. Once again, it has a whole new a legend of how it came to be found and why it exists and what it does, and then that same leaf that is cured by mithril happens to be thrown by Durin, Papa Durin, and it goes all the way down to the bottom where there's Balrog, who remained unbothered for the entire Second Age and gets pissed off at this fucking leaf. Right? He's like, "Who dropped a leaf on me?"
You know what would have been a cool scene right there is if there was a sleeping Balrog and the leaf landed and the Balrog just sort of like twitched a little. He didn't wake up and breathe fire and shit.
The leaf just burns up because it's in proximity to the Balrog, but they don't show the Balrog because you don't know what it is. So it just hints at some sort of like peril or danger, but it's a mystery still. And they don't reveal the actual fucking Balrog.
But they had to show the Balrog because it's so cool.
200 feet below where Durin is and probably hear them talking.
And wouldn't they have heard the Balrog
roar like
roaring?
That?
Yeah, it would have echoed through the fucking. It's a Maiar. It would have echoed through all of Moria, probably.
Yeah. They'd already sealed it up. Durin was like, seal it up, and it was since it was just one wall. They just put one of those patch things you get at Home Depot, and you scrape this
little drywall patch.
Drywall patch, and that is totally soundproof, so they wouldn't have heard the Balrog. I hate this storyline. I actually liked Elrond and Durin at first quite a lot, but I think Durin they had Durin and Elendil that cry like a ton in this episode. There, do you know the scene where like Galadriel, Bronwyn, and Muriel are all standing there, and they're all like, "Elendil, where's Elendil?" And he's over there crying.
Right? Like, wait,
they're all
what?
like tough boss girls, and he's like, "Oh." I was just like, "Wow, guys, really?
Yeah.
You're really feeding the trolls with this shit." Like all the like anti-feminist types are like, "See, they're making men weak," and it's like, well, they kind of are.
That's what they're saying in their Hollywood Reporter article. Is they're like, we are in this culture war. Like they're acting like the showrunners are acting like they're victims to the hate that they are intentionally trolling people with, probably intentionally on purpose. They're sitting there with their isolated writing teams, and they're like, hit these points. Find these things that are going to agitate reactionarists to like get the fucking to get the internet hot, because the show itself and the content don't matter. It's the reaction to it, because what's really at stake here is how we all define reality, and they're clearly a part of wanting to call people who are critical of the show patently evil, which, if I recall, I mean, that's like saying those kind of words, levying those kind of claims that critics of the show are patently evil is kind of indicative of them being patently evil.
Well,
yeah,
if one were cynical, you could posit that they are poking that reactionary bear to give themselves cover from legitimate criticism, because then that allows them to say, "Oh, you only just don't like the show because you're sexist and racist, and you don't like the changes we've made to adapt to a modern audience."
Yeah.
But the point is, like, no, we don't like the show because it sucks. Like, I don't care about all that other stuff. That stuff's fine. Like, cool.
No, but they do want to push this political kind of approach to dealing with criticism, because it's, I don't know, it's
easier. It's easier.
And
it scores. I think it scores people certain kinds of like points in a way.
Well,
like unfortunately, I think it brings out the worst in everybody.
I think it's easier because it allows everyone to continue thinking via fallacy, which is the easiest way to pretend like you're thinking, but not address the fact that you're committing massive fallacies by making these arguments that you must be just racist or sexist for disregarding or disliking aspects of the way they make the show.
Well, and it perpetuates this economy of outrage too, where you've got people tuning into the show just to see, oh, what is everybody all pissed off about? Like, what's the big deal? They have women and minorities doing things. I got to check this out. And then you've got YouTubers and other people in the media capitalizing on that by driving views and driving engagement by, hate bashing it. So it's just this huge orgy of incestual like bullshit that feeds off each other and just makes everything worse. It's terrible.
It's terrible. And in the meantime, this show just continues to suck.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Though I will say, just having observed from the beginning of this, from pre-release, when there was a lot of discussion about like the racial diversity, to now, I see a lot of I hardly even hear about that anymore. People are talking about story stuff, lore stuff, characters.
The people defending the show are bringing that up.
Right. They're bringing that up now. Right. Yeah. So I think there's been that little flip flop between them, and
they keep defaulting to that. Did you ever watch that panel with the three non binary like woke kids, which it was kind of interesting, but also it just showed that was a part of the showrunner's agenda, it seemed like. I'll find that video and send it to you guys if you haven't watched it, but because that gets brought up as some criticism, points of criticism, and then also it's used to defend the show, which is just seems like this is an agenda ridden project that literally the story is not even a concern.
And that is a problem with this kind of this sort of new approach to creating stories, making the political agenda so important to these adaptations, to these stories. It's not like I don't want to see more modernization. It's not like I'm offended by more diversity, but I don't like agendas. I don't like it when that becomes more important than telling a good story.
The agenda isn't a sincere agenda when it's being done cynically.
Right.
Cynically. Absolutely.
It's false. It's
big
false.
Corporations.
It detracts from like the legitimate problems with representation that we have in Hollywood. And it distracts from actually fixing those issues and moving society forward. It's like with the Me Too movement, when you had certain people popping up and claiming, rape or sexual harassment dishonestly. And every time someone does that, it undermines the experience of someone who actually experienced something like that and makes the problem a million times exponentially worse. And that in a sense is kind of what Amazon is doing. Like they're contributing to the problem instead of honestly and sincerely trying to fix it.
Yeah, no, they're once again they're trying to hit their metrics. Exactly. They're not, once again, they are not actually genuinely treating things. They're just hitting metrics, which for them is a move for their capital. It's not because they're trying to address like the oppression of people, which they kind of barely do in the show. And also, even when they try to do it in the show, like with Adar and his orcs, it almost seems like, oh, the evil orcs are the anti-imperialists, which is like what it's so confused.
They're evil.
It's like
I'll be right back.
Yeah, so it's like it's once again it's confusing. The sides and the scales of oppression. It's like it's so unclear as to what the fuck they're trying to do.
Well, because they don't have an actual message. They just want to wear the vestments of wokeness, for lack of a better term. I hate that term, and reap the benefits of it without actually thinking through what is the message we're trying to convey with this story and with these casting choices. Like we're just pandering at this point.
Yeah, and poorly doing so.
Yeah, and not actually conveying any sort of constructive or thoughtful story that could lead to constructive changes in society and make people actually question their prejudices and their biases.
Right. Yeah. Instead, they're stoking the fire.
Yep.
They're essentially pulling the Mount Doom trick that they just did. They just like their whole show is a water deluge into a volcanic, active volcano that just is going to steam explode. And like once again, the showrunners are like, we're at the fault line of a culture war. And it's like, no, you're not a victim. You put yourself in that position because you wanted to actually stoke this fire.
They want to be like Watchmen, but without like the skill or the writing to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because that shit was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the all the dialogues in episode 7 were so trite, and Durin and his pops, man, that was just terrible. When he pulls the crest off him and he like disowns him, tells him he doesn't have any. He's no longer a part of the family just because of some comment about elves. It's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Like I get it. There's strife and there's differences and the different peoples of Middle Earth. Which also, I wanted to say, like, okay, so an issue with Tolkien is saying calling the race of humans men, like from the elvish perspective, is something you could address and change, and just call them peoples, right? The free peoples of Middle Earth involves hobbits, dwarves, elves, men, and if they wanted to, they could have, instead of having Arendor constantly call humans men, they could have addressed that in their writing and called them people.
Yeah.
But no, they had to stick to that antiquated, problematic part of Tolkien, which really it's just kind of because of his, circumstances in time, is that back then he just referred to people as men because that's what humans are. But of course, there's problems with that. So, but they didn't, once again, try to address that at all. They could have, but did they? No. So that makes them like, what line are they towing?
Yeah. Well, and so going back to the conflict with the two Durins, that's just indicative of like it's just melodrama. It's drama with no overall purpose. They're just injecting it for the sake of the drama, just because that's all they have. Like,
okay, so it's like selling Sunset or the Real Housewives of Middle Earth or some shit. It's like
the Real Housewives of Casa Doom. Their beards.
Yeah, the Real House dudes of Moria. Yeah, Casa Doom is it's literally pointless bickering, just like reality TV shows. That's why they're hitting those same streaming tropes because that's their metrics, which they continually try to say this show is so loved and well watched, and constantly are trying to like bury any kind of numbers as to what sort of ratings.
And decent because of the controversy. That goes back to the whole cynical like application of what they're doing. Like,
you mean like J.J. Abrams and Star Wars and Star Trek and the fuck your expectations, like you're a stupid ass fucking consumer, so we're gonna ruin it so that you are tragically victimized by our bullshit.
I mean, like, good numbers are not indicative of a good show.
Exactly. No.
That's why reality TV, all these things that are not great have big numbers. Have you guys gone to, there's two different Rings of Power Reddit forums, subreddits or whatever. There's the Lord of the Rings of Power one, the official one or whatever. And then there's the other one where everybody hates it. It's kind of crazy to go back and forth between these. Like when I'm reading reactions to these episodes at the fanboy one, I'm just like, what are you fucking smoking? Because I would like some so that I could also enjoy this. Like people are just like, wow, this was so epic and incredible. With that part where they showed the Southlands and then it switched to Mordor, I was like, whoa, what? I'm just like, really, guy? You what the fuck?
Yeah.
How? I honestly, I know that it's all a matter of taste, yada, yada, yada. But there are so many objectively bad things about this show.
But you could have juvenile tastes and still be a grown-ass adult and just think it's a fucking enjoyable jack-off hour of cool, like, teenage D&D, or like, I remember like, being in third grade playing D&D and just like having 50 dragons in a cave. And it's like, that's cool. That checks out. Does it work for Amazon? Yeah, they maybe some of their writers might be, 12-year-olds. That'd be literally awesome.
Nothing in this show is as cool as 50 dragons in a cave, though. That would be,
I know.
That would be awesome.
That's an episode of Rick and Morty, I'm pretty sure.
Hell yeah. But only if the dragons are having an orgy.
Yes.
The sluts.
Dude, that episode is so ridiculous.
But
I don't really watch that show, but Ian showed me that episode and I was like, what the fuck are we watching, dude? This is ridiculous.
So I'm not going to begrudge anybody their enjoyment of this show.
Only a little.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me question, their status as a mature functioning adult. But that being said, my parents love the show, so. But
hey, I have a lot of friends who don't read Tolkien, and they're like, "Oh, this shit's awesome," and I'm like, "Yeah, cool. I'm glad that you think
I know
it's popping off for you. That's fine. I'm not gonna, we've ruined our own mentalities by caring about Tolkien, so we're actually the fucking idiots.
There's a tempest in me, Marcus."
But what gets to me is when they start to argue with you about like why the show is great, and it's like, look, I'm respecting your right to like love the show and just let that be. You should show me the same respect that I don't enjoy the show and I have my reasons. So like, don't try to convince me of how wonderful it is and then ignore all my reasons for how terrible it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're gonna ignore that you're allowed to have your own feelings, but then without listening to what your reasonings are, they're going to just, you brand you as like the showrunners did, patently evil, racist, fascist, all this kind of shit. You're like, this is some more this is some ad hominem attack. There's so many fallacies in the thinking around like the criticisms of the show.
Yeah. I post my review, right? I post my review to Facebook and people are like, I don't understand why anyone has a problem with this. And I'm like, well, it's a fucking review. Why don't you read it?
Yeah.
Then you can understand. I explain. And they're like, well, it's fucking, and then they go out, they have these comments where they're like, it's just the best show ever, and they don't actually say anything, or they're like, you should be fired from your job and Forbes should get a real critic who likes this show. And I'm like, that's not what a real critic is. And then they're like, why don't you just stop watching it then? And I'm like,
I have to.
TV critic. Like that's what I do for my job. But also like that's a terrible thing to tell people. Like maybe we wanted to like this show, right? Maybe we wanted to watch this show. Maybe we're watching it like so. Also, from the perspective of Amazon or anybody who's airing the show, telling people not to watch it is just bad for business.
Yeah.
If people aren't watching it, then the ratings go down.
Exactly.
Then you know, like
Season
it's just
2 doesn't get made.
Right. Well, I think they're in I think this. I honestly think this is a Jeff Bezos, or as I like to call him, Joffrey Bezos, ego project. Right. Like this is This is not about money. This is about his ego.
No, he said that. He said it's about his fucking. I mean, he didn't say it's about his
in
ego,
so many words. He said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What flabbergasts me though is like how on board the estate was apparently.
Well,
they must have got duped. There must have been some double crossing. They were like, fishing for Netflix and HBO and shutting them down, and then finally somehow went with Amazon, possibly because of the coin. But yeah, how are they not reeling, and how is there not like something in contract?
But like
they've
been apparently like had consultants on set and like had people from the estate involved intimately in like developing the story and stuff. And it's like who like because Christopher, when he was around, would have never allowed this to happen. Which I had a problem with him not allowing more media to be made with Tolkien's writings, but if this is the media we're going to get, then he was a hero.
Like, I mean, maybe he was.
Like of course,
he saw the writing on the wall. Of course.
Yeah.
No, that's another thing I've seen fanboys come up with. They're like, that the Tolkien estate is fully on board with this. They're at the writing table and da. And I'm like, well, then they suck. Like they don't understand Tolkien's work. Yeah. Look, if I don't know about you guys, but if I was either somebody with a couple $1 billion to spare or the Tolkien estate, like I would come up with a show. My ideal, like Lord of the Rings adaptation is an animated, like 3-season long, as close to word for word adaptation as possible of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where it's slow, you have all the songs, you have, as accurately portrayed events from the books as possible on screen, which you can only do with animation. You cannot do it with live action. And you just don't even care that it's like the biggest, flashiest, most expensive thing. You make it beautiful and you make it meaningful and you convey what Tolkien was trying to do on screen. That's what I would do.
Yeah. But art is dead. Like art has been straight up fucking murdered, especially when you look at things like Tolkien. I mean, and it clearly what was once art is first of all dated and needs to be revised, rewritten. It's like
for a modern audience.
It's revisionist history for fiction. It's fucking insane.
Yeah.
The thing I don't understand though is that if you had Bezos money, then you can do art because it doesn't matter how successful it is. It doesn't matter if it's popular. It doesn't matter how many people watch it. Who the fuck cares? It doesn't matter if you it's a passion project. You don't need a return on that investment. Just
maybe someone like Bezos doesn't have passion.
Wait, is that you think? Oh my God, that must be it. He's a soulless fuckboy.
He's
a cuckold.
Bezos.
Yes, you can do it. Yeah. Oh man,
yeah. I mean, this is the problem. It's exemplary of just of the corporate. And again, this is when we go to like wokeness or like this idea of like representation or diversity when it's being served up in a corporate lunch line approach to like values. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. And like I'm not saying I get annoyed by people who get all freaked out about diversity in something like Lord of the Rings. Like I think it's the wrong thing to worry about. But I think it is okay to say that like the way that these things are being served up is fucking bullshit. And from Netflix or Amazon or all these soulless corporations that are feeding us are, and also I think that they are co-opting a lot of the great things that exist in like, not just nerd fandom, but just like, like you said, art, like these great books, these great stories are being taken over by soulless corporations and fed to us as though they're giving us something better. And it's not better. It's not better. It's not even close.
No. No, once again, Bezos is Sauron, and Amazon is Mordor, and
one does not simply walk.
Capitalism is the totalitarian regime that Tolkien was fighting against, and they clearly are fighting back by destroying what he stood for by acting as a totalitarian capitalist force.
Capitalism is the essence of Morgoth that was infused into to reality.
Yes. I mean, it's possibly true. I mean, Tolkien was kind of like, inspired by our actual reality and having these sort of issues. The corruption of man is real. It happens all the time.
A theme that recurs in his stuff. It's that, and I think that's a reason. Tolkien was, by any like, he's a very fascinating guy. He's a lot more conservative than any of us sitting here right now. Like, culturally conservative guy. Right. His views of the world, though, I think defy our political sides that we have now, right? Like, there's no, like, Tolkien wouldn't have fit neatly into a box of Republican or Democrat or like culturally conservative or woke or any of that stuff. Yeah. And that's what's so hard for these modern writers to understand. They want to make this for a modern audience. Well, it's not interesting anymore if that's what you're doing. You should look at what he was trying to do for his time, because that's the story. That's what makes it really compelling. He had a philosophy. He had a view of the world that is foreign to us now in a lot of ways,
but still relevant, even though foreign,
relatable, foreign, but exactly, like, it's something that is it's interesting in the way that, like, traveling to a different country is interesting. Yes.
But they're avoiding that kind of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then accusing everyone that they are champions of that responsibility.
It irks me to no end.
I think he would abstain from modern political debate. So I try to think back, like, because our modern political spectrum essentially has its roots in the French Revolution, with the left and the right being supporters of the monarchy and the aristocracy, and the rights of the nobles, and the left being the revolutionaries and the supporters of the commoners and fraternity, equality, liberty, which I definitely lean more towards the left. But the risk that Tolkien recognizes, and a lot of people who are conservatives recognize, is the left often leads to things like the Reign of Terror and Robespierre and the tyranny of the masses. And so I could see him in a situation like the French Revolution, just walking away and going to his farm and living a simple life like a hobbit on his farm. Mm-hmm. And that's really what he was all about.
And not as a libertarian, though.
No, but he was a monarchist in the sense that, like, he was an idealistic monarchist. He believed in, if you had the person who had the right to be the king as the king, and who was almost like a Platonic concept of monarchy,
Sure.
Well, the most interesting thing I read about that was that someone who described his politics as anarcho-monarchalism. And, like, the idea that the Shire is a self-governed place. They have a king. The king lives way over there. Nobody really thinks about the king, but still they're king, right? Yeah. So they're not like anarchists specifically, but they're also not directly governed by this oppressive force.
Yeah, so it's you have the figure of the monarchy as a means of maintaining social cohesion and order, but it's not the type of monarchy that's coming in and taking half your pigs and half your crop and telling you how to live your life. You are living your own life and governing yourself at the local level, which I think that jives
and governed by old traditions, and he was anti-industrialist. He
governed by respect for tradition and the natural world and like one another, not.
I can get down with these ideas.
Yeah.
It's straight up some golden rule,
Yeah.
which is it's for all of its misuses and adoptions, that's still a pretty classic thing to rely on.
That's why the hobbits are able to act as the heroes of the Lord of the Rings, because they're not engaged at that political, like that geopolitical level where they have to wield power, where they have to be kings, where they have to to make experience the compromise that power brings.
They're uncorrupted.
Yeah, exactly.
No, because all of those other issues
that's
are
that's why Isildur couldn't
corruption.
get rid of the ring, and that's why Aragorn couldn't have gotten rid of the ring either, as Isildur's descendant, because he is part of that world where you aren't uncorrupted. As noble and as heroic as Aragorn is, he is still corrupted by his participation in the political world, in wars, as a warrior, whereas the hobbits are.
But what about Faramir?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. Yeah.
I mean, there's only a couple people who can take the ring and give it back.
He gives it up willingly, yeah.
Just no problem, right? Like Tom Bombadil, Faramir, Sam. Is that the Bilbo? Really?
Bilbo.
It's Bilbo. It takes effort, though.
But he gives it up.
He does, but I mean, it takes a lot of work.
Well, because he'd had it for like, in his defense, he'd had it longer than anyone else. Like,
very
Sam
true, very true.
Had it, the longer you have it, the more it gets his talent.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because that's why Frodo, of course, can't. God, can you even imagine these jokers who write this show like coming up with something as great as like Gollum being the one who has to fall into Mount Doom?
That's
like,
they never writing, yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And they're trying so hard to emulate it, and they're just falling on their faces.
I'm now starting to be so skeptical about they say they are trying to emulate it, and it's this love letter, but are they really? Like, because it seems like they probably don't even reference Tolkien's writing.
It feels like that
at all. Like they clearly maybe reference the Peter Jackson trilogy, so it's like derivative. It's derivative,
yeah,
and so that's why it's falling apart. Is that they're simulating love for Tolkien through derivative. Yeah,
Peter Jackson.
Yeah. The only things they've referenced in Tolkien's writings are like the names of places and characters. Other than that, it's like has no correlation to any of it.
Well,
and his actual.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying his actual writing style, his diction, his prose, like his ability to create poetic language is one of the best things about him. Which he did so because of his love for literature and myth, and that's completely been avoided in this show. Is his ability to write so well? It's completely just fucking gone.
Well, and they've had one song, that Poppy sings in that one episode, which was fine. It was fine.
I'll give
it. I liked that. Yeah. Like, I don't like exactly how it was produced, but I liked that they did it. They just don't. I don't know. I think that Peter Jackson actually is looking at that trilogy is really an interesting way to think about this project, because. I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw the Jackson movies, I was very upset. I liked certain things about it a lot, but I found like certain, like cutting the Scouring of the Shire, very upsetting, and certain other choices. But now when I look back and I'm like, I was upset by this, but like, look at what they're doing now with an edit. Yeah. Like at least like Jackson was obviously trying really hard to do a good job adapting.
I was
story.
More upset with The Two Towers and Return of the King. I thought The Fellowship of the Ring was about as good a cinematic adaptation as you were.
I really liked it.
Right.
That was a great. That was of the three. That's my favorite to this day. And I've watched it many more times.
The Hobbit was pretty bad. The three.
We don't talk about The Hobbit.
Yeah. I know. Sorry, I said anything.
The dwarf scene.
But to watch how fucking crazy it is.
Misty mountains.
Yeah, I just throw it on with the kids sometimes. That song is actually pretty cool. I like
that's
that
a
song.
really good song. I like that scene.
And there's scenes that are awesome, where they actually do capture, in my imagination what I saw in my mind's eye reading the book. But then there's other things
Right.
like fucking the love triangle and all the other. It's just
Yeah. And the Battle of the Five Armies just has so many
ridiculous.
bad scenes. It's
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, no, it should have been one movie.
Mhm.
It was going to be, and then they announced it to be 2. And then after they announced it to be 2,
why was that?
What about
Capitalism,
episode 4, The Hobbit Returns with a vengeance?
Well, I'm waiting for them to make the Shadow Returns in the sequel to Lord of the Rings, like, because that Tolkien had writings hinting at he was crafting a story around that, but he abandoned it. But I'm waiting for them to somebody to buy the rights to that and develop it and make a sequel to Lord of the Rings.
There's 12 beautiful pages that he wrote about the Shadow returning, and they're really cool. And watching Tolkien scholars talk about it is neat. But yes, it would make a sweet action flick,
I think it'd be good for a D&D campaign of some kind,
Well, that would be cool, but I mean, RPGs are still apparently sacred and can't be destroyed.
a horror superhero crossover, like a whole new fusion genre.
Sure. I mean, Marvel and Star Wars have to make Union someday, so maybe that along those lines.
Isn't it funny that Amazon? Do you guys watch The Boys?
Yeah, it's great.
It's
amazing.
Fantastic, right?
They,
like a great show.
It out of the park on that one. I don't know why they couldn't do it on the show.
It's because they're showrunners of fucking pimp, and they're writers, and I mean, Garth is a part of the team. Like all these people, or Warren Ellis. Sorry, not Garth Ennis. Right? Is Warren Ellis wrote it?
I don't know.
Why am I fucking confused? Who wrote the goddamn comic? Anyway, like I remember things. Yeah, that show is amazing.
I can't remember either, actually. It's fantastic, and I can't quite square it. But then again, there's lots of Netflix shows like that. A good Netflix show and a bad Netflix show.
At the end of the day, it comes down to people making it, and if you've got the talent and you've got the
Garth Ennis
dedication.
Yeah, it was Garth Ennis. Okay, I don't know.
Derek
why
Robertson.
Right.
Yeah, it's like.
But again,
there's a faithfulness to the.
Yeah, I don't know why. To getting back to our criticism of capitalism and soulless corporations and everything, because The Boys is a huge hit. It makes them a ton of money. I don't know why this correlation between quality and profit hasn't borne out more consistently. It blows my mind.
Well, they don't value writing. I think that's just a huge part of it. Like with The Boys, they have excellent writing. It's not really about special effects or any. I mean, there are obviously special effects in The Boys.
Yeah, but no, it's the dialogue, it's the tension. It's the scenarios. It's beautiful,
dark
tension.
humor. It's just and with something like I swear to God, it's something to do with fantasy specifically, where they're like
ruined.
where all these people making these things don't really understand what makes fantasy good.
Yeah.
Because they've never played D&D, for fuck's sake. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Or they never even read Tolkien.
I had a really interesting Twitter. Okay, it wasn't interesting. This person on Twitter was really mad at me and said that I had false literary pride. Which I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking? But then they said this is the best family fantasy show ever made. And then I was like, that's bullshit. But then when I started to think about how many family fantasy shows had been made, I could only think of a few, and most of them are animated. There aren't a lot of fantasy family shows.
I thought Disney did one that was I don't ever saw it, but maybe I'm thinking of something else.
Clearly not that great of a show. There's for me, I could think of Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Dragon Prince,
The Dragon Prince. No, I thought there was a young adult series they did.
There's Legend of the Seeker and stuff, but
there's things back in the 80s. There's Fraggle Rock. Is that a fantasy show? There was that wasn't there Jim Henson's The Storyteller? That show was.
Well, there's Dark Crystal. The new Dark Crystal is a show. Really okay, so there are some, but there aren't there just aren't a lot, really. And there's the new Willow show coming out.
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, but we're reaching back to before there was, streaming wars and endless need to
shows
create
constantly,
episodic series,
But I guess I could see how some people would see this show and say, hey, look, like we have a big budget fantasy show we can watch with our kids now that isn't a cartoon. But at the same time, as I recognize that might be really cool for them, it's like, well, couldn't it be so much better?
Why couldn't it? That's not an excuse for being
so
bad.
much better. Yeah. Like, yes, we do need more family-oriented fantasy. Like, obviously, I'm not going to sit around with my kids and watch Game of Thrones. But I would love to watch a show that was like the same production value as Game of Thrones, that was just geared toward like a Dragonlance show or something, right?
Yeah.
So I think we do need more of that.
Well, the thing with Rings of Power that gets me though is like, to be charitable, like making a show like this is not easy. No. Like I if you gave me the money and told me to go make the show, I wouldn't even know where to start. It's very hard. And that's why really good shows are rarities, and that's why they're treasured and cherished. And so, these guys have never done this before, being showrunners for something at this scale.
Bad idea.
But like, I could be more forgiving to them if they were tripping up on like the technical side of show making, as long as they were still being faithful and true to the writings of Tolkien. But they're dropping the ball on both ends, and that's where like I have no sympathy for them.
Well, and then they're being assholes in their defense of themselves.
Yeah, it's the full Monty. It's just everything. There, again, it just goes right back to like, if this had been expensive fan fiction done well and they fucked the lore up, fine. Alternatively, if they had done the lore really well, but they'd fucked some of the filmmaking stuff up, fine. But it's everything.
Yep.
And we have one episode left. I saw a trailer that they released at New York City Comic Con, which was almost entirely comprised of previous episodes. I'm not sure how you make a trailer that's for the next episode based almost entirely off footage from previous episodes, but I am from a purely narrative standpoint, like, have we reached the final episode of a season? Like, where are we with this story? Like, this is what's confusing me. Like, I don't feel like we've actually gotten anywhere with this story.
Wait, what are they?
Like, stuff has happened, but the story.
How are they going to wrap it up?
And
they're probably going to fuck it up, wrapping it up.
The only dangling threads I can think of is like, who's the stranger? Where are they going to go with that? Are they going to resolve that? Which I doubt they're going to at this point.
The cultists,
and then we haven't gotten back to Eregion and Celebrimbor and the actual Rings of Power and where is Anatar and what's going on with that?
The actual Rings of Power that the show is named after.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to be made out of mithril. Which I think one of them was. Were they all made out of mithril?
I think.
I know.
I know at least one of them was.
At least one of them was made out of mithril.
Yeah, I think one. I don't think they all were. I think one was gold.
Yeah.
One was silver. But like their power wasn't derived purely from the fact that they were mithril. Like mithril was just the metal it was made out of. It was the art.
Yeah, they were infused. Yeah, they're infused with the magic.
Yeah.
There's another thing. This is what I wanted to touch on before we wrap this up. There were theories that the whole mithril thing was just a fake out. Like that Anatar or Sauron had tricked Gil-galad into thinking that the mithril. But then in this episode, in the most recent episode, the leaf is healed by, which I would like some of that for my house plants. But that sort of disproves that whole idea that maybe this was just a trickery, right? Because it literally, we see it.
Right.
Healing.
Yeah. No, it's what the elves need. They need their mithril butt plugs. That's how they will make it to the third age, where then they can go quietly into the night.
So just keep that in mind next time you watch The Lord of the Rings. Every single one of those elves only made it to the third age because they have a mithril butt plug.
Yeah, it's just mithril just chugging through there.
I'm pretty sure I've seen those on Etsy.
If not before this show, certainly after. It's like in Breaking Bad.
Oh, man, we got to corner that market, guys.
I know,
the mithril butt plug market.
Oh, dude. No,
that's gonna take off. Like there's
it's
crazy goth chicks who are into fantasy who are gonna be all about that.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, we've got one more episode to watch. Come comes out Thursday. And yeah, we'll talk about it then. This was fun. I think we covered all the bases. You know?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me sad.
I know. We'll see what happens in episode 8.
Yep.
Episode 8.
Maybe
and then we got like
totally
2
redeem
years.
themselves.
Oh, how will they wrap it up?
Galadriel will be Sauron, and Halbrand will be Galadriel. All right.